Good morning. I'd like to call the Door County Board of Supervisors meeting to order on Tuesday, December 15th at approximately 10 a.m. Would you please join me in a pledge of allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. We have 19 present, one absent and one vacant. Thank you. Presentation of the agenda.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Correspondence. You also notice the unassigned fund balances in there. And I believe everybody received an email from Mr. Seegers.
Yeah.
Public comment. Before we open up public comment to the public, I would like to make a public comment. Today, of course, is our ugly sweater day, our face mask day. I do want to let you know that there are prizes for the ugliest sweater that will be awarded a little bit later. And one such prize is one of these beautiful hats.
Oh,
Nice.
But, I mean, so there'll be one of these available.
I
was also told that part of the prize selection and whoever wears the best get up today is part of the spirit of the meeting too. So, Santa, I think, is obviously the lead on the spirit side at the moment.
That's exactly why he showed up today. Operation. Every all across the country, I guess.
Okay, and with that, we'll now open up our public comment to the public.
All right, thank you. So for those individuals who are either online, if you're online, you can select on the thing to raise your hand and I will unmute you. Likewise, those that are on phone, you can hit *3 on your telephone and I can also unmute you and give you the floor. So we will ask you 3 times if there's any public comment, and if they pop up, I will recognize you. So for the first time, is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak? For the second time, is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak? Let's wait this one. For the final time, is there anyone else who'd like to speak? I've checked both the chat and there is no raised hand, so we can proceed.
Okay, thank you. So the supervisor's response. Approval of minutes of November 11, 2020, budget annual meeting, and November 2020 special meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve both sets of minutes as presented.
District 15, second.
Thank you. Any changes, additions, deletions, rounding remarks, other errors or omissions? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? County Administrator.
Sure, so I'm just gonna cover the monthly report first, and then we have both Sue and Dan just for our update on the COVID. But just on the monthly report, you'll notice that the memo's gotten a little bit shorter. In other words, we have a lot of projects that have gotten completed. So that's actually great news, and we have updates on the other in terms of the status of some of the ones that are getting close to, I guess, being completed in terms of their final closeout. Likewise, we also added some new projects that we're tracking, and that's more towards the end of the report, especially for the sexually violent persons, the housing. I added that as something that we're going to start tracking. Other notes of interest, obviously, they are included in your packet. I thought it was nice because they had it at facilities and parks. We did include the pictures from the riprap at Lower LaSalle. That's completed, and you see the photos in that packet. Likewise, you also see the photos for the sheriff garage are also included. And also the photos for, I believe on the last page, that it's also the fencing done at John Miles Park. So those are all included just for FYI. And if not, then I will also, I guess right now, I'll turn it over to Sue for her update. Sue, I have you unmuted and you have the floor.
Good morning, everybody. This is Sue Powers, Public Health Manager and Health Officer. Is my sound working okay? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. Start out with some good news. Case numbers just decreasing over the last few weeks, and this is the trend across Northeast Wisconsin and the majority of the state. So for the most part, we've been able to, again, do full contact tracing. So really happy about that. The trend across the state and the country has been an increase in hospitalizations and deaths. So we have been very fortunate to have had minimal of both of those. So numbers down a bit, feeling a little relief, but please know we can't afford to relax any precautions. Then on December 7th, per the state DHS guidelines, we began to allow some modification of quarantine periods for close contacts without symptoms. Close contacts can end quarantine after 7 days with a negative test or after 10 days, providing they continue to monitor for symptoms. The intent of these modifications are to reduce the personal burden of that full 14-day quarantine and then hopefully increase compliance with a shortened quarantine period. The modifications are only intended to be used with individuals who can reliably report their symptoms and who are not in high-risk settings. There is, we know, increased risk with any modification to the full 14 days because we know that the incubation period for COVID is up to 14 days. This science has not changed. So we strongly recommend that all schools, students, and staff, daycare agencies, and any other congregate settings adhere to the full 14-day quarantine. We are continuing to meet with the schools on a regular basis. And at last meeting last week, they were all on board with continuation of the full 14 days for their students and staff. So the last thing I'll touch on is everyone's heard the exciting news about the Pfizer vaccine being approved. I could talk about it all morning, but just a few highlights. Door County Public Health is enrolled as a COVID vaccine provider. And maybe you've also heard the vaccine will be rolled out in tiers, beginning with healthcare providers and long-term care residents. Vaccine is arriving in Wisconsin this week. We've received notice that hospitals and clinics will be prioritized. So I anticipate DCMC will be obtaining their vaccine supply before we do. Long-term care facilities are partnered with pharmacies for getting the vaccine, and that process will begin the last week in December, from what I was informed of yesterday. We were told public health will need to provide the vaccine for EMS staff, and past that, we'll get further clarifications and directions about who else in this very first tier we are expected to provide for. We have no indication at this time of any timeline for when the vaccine will be available to others. Thank you again to Dan Kane for helping us plan logistics for the vaccine, drive-through clinics. Also EMS and Chris Hecht from Sister Bay Fire have again been a part of the conversation. We met also with Door County Medical Center to stay on the same page. So thank you again to those folks, to Dan, Aaron LeClaire and crew, and then to Chris for his endless ability to round up volunteers for us. So the last important point I really want to make is that vaccine approval is driven by science, and the COVID vaccine had to undergo complex trials and review. And like all vaccines, it will continue to be monitored for safety. We will be putting out messaging, and we'll put out messaging as we get more information. Our intent is to provide vaccine safely, quickly, and equitably for our entire community. Please bear in mind it's going to be some months before we have community immunity, and so we'll need to continue all the COVID precautions. That is my update.
Thank you, Sue. Let me go to Dan next, and then we'll see if there's any questions. 1 second. Ken, you have the floor.
All right, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. I'll keep my comments brief this morning. A couple of just quick things I wanted to run past you. The first is related to COVID testing. We do have final numbers from our COVID testing sites over the last several months, and I wanted to share those with you. Related to our Sister Bay testing site, we had our first site on October 19th. We tested 60. November 2nd was 169. November 16th was 211. And November 30th was 130. So that trend towards the end of November falls very much in line with a decrease in testing we saw not only in Door County but statewide. The Sturgeon Bay sites, alternatively, every other week. October 26th, they did 200 tests. November 9th, 230 tests. November 23rd, 236 tests. And December 7th, 150 tests. I do have a request into the state. The National Guard was federally re-upped for next year and allowed to continue testing through March of 2021. I do have a request into the state to provide that for Door County between the months of January and March. So more details. I don't have exact dates or anything on that yet, but that will be available to us next year. And the only other thing I was going to touch on that Sue did a great job, again, is the vaccine planning. I do have a task force stood up with that, and Sue mentioned several that are on that. We're going to continue to plan for vaccines as much as possible. As with this entire thing, it's a lot of information at fast paces and not so much notice all the time. So we'll do as much as we can with the information that we're provided and plan as best we can accordingly. The one thing I will briefly bring to your attention is we're looking at some grants to help provide an opportunity for a vaccine trailer, point of dispensing trailer that we are looking at that might aid us in our efforts to distribute this vaccine, as we know that we won't be able to distribute it all in one location. We'll have to be mobile oftentimes throughout the county. And this might be a great option for us in order to help us do that, a great resource. So I want to put that on your radar. We're looking into that, and more to come next month when we get more specifics. And that is the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Dan or Sue? Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Sue. One thing that I think would benefit the public is more information about how to live healthy. I guess the thing that's a little discouraging about all this is there seems to be this underlying message just because of fear or panic, but there seems to be an underlying message in our society that you can live as unhealthily as you like, and you'll just have a vaccine to like save you from all of it. And I realize your jobs are really overwhelmed with sort of the nitty gritty in the day to day. I long for more messaging to the public about healthy living, about ways that we need to get the toxins and poisons out of our food system, out of our water supply, out of the air we breathe. There's many strong connections around the world where the people who are suffering most from COVID, whether it be in underprivileged urban areas in this country or places like in Wuhan where they use Roundup at an alarming rate, these poisons and toxins are in our food supply and are affecting our health. And those are the people that are suffering from this malady the worst. And the notion that a vaccine is sort of this panacea pie in the sky going to save us all. It's obviously helpful and it's part of the toolbox. I just wish there was more public messaging about good health and good living. Thank you.
Anybody else? Kara?
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to speak on the messaging for the vaccine because I've been reading a lot about how certain groups are fearful of vaccines because of things like the Tuskegee experiment and Black women dying at a higher rate. And I think that if public health was just honest with people and said, like, yes, there are going to be side effects, and maybe you'll have to, like, you'll be out for a day or out of work for a couple days. I think that the honesty would, instead of people jumping on other people for not wanting to take a vaccine, I feel like that will be the most helpful, just being really honest. And I'm hoping that that's what the messaging that comes out is. But yeah, that's basically all I had to say. Oh yeah, I had a question about the amount, because I had read, like, there was a certain amount of vaccines that were coming out, and then will that be gone very quickly? And then there's more that, like, weren't purchased that might go overseas from Pfizer. Is that correct, Sue?
I don't know where all the vaccine is going, Carol, but I do know that we'll get an initial allotment, and then, more will be coming. As far as messaging for vaccines, and also to Bob's point about messaging about health, our public health mission includes messaging about how to live healthy. Granted, we've had other messages taking priority at present, but I appreciate the comments about that. And the messaging for vaccines has always been and will continue to be to get across all the information we have, which is accurate and factual. There is a vaccine information statement out, and some, information for people getting the vaccine, and it includes, things about possible side effects. And it would not be accurate to tell someone, you're going to be out of work for 2 days after the vaccine, because that doesn't happen to everyone, a certain percentage. And in the information that will be given to the public when you receive a vaccine, that will be part of it. And that is not something authored by us. It is something authored by the CDC and the state, with that important information. And yeah, we try all the time to dispel myths, and there are sure a lot of them.
Okay.
And then just one last reminder as we start, I guess, jumping down to the resolutions, just because of the volume. If we can, again, use your pads to, I guess, motion and second them, that help us just in terms of the flow. This is a reminder, just so we're just going to go through all of them. For all of them, we're going to do use the pad for the motion and second our discussion. Okay, we'll follow that. We have it. We're all set.
Okay. We are going to jump around the agenda a little bit based on who is here. I will start off with the first resolution, 2020-100, in appreciation, Jason, County Treasurer. Would somebody like to motion that?
I'll second that.
You got it. Okay. Thank you. I will read it. Resolution 2020-100, in appreciation, Jason, County Treasurer. To the Door County Board of Supervisors. Whereas Jason was elected to the office of County Treasurer for Door County in the fall of 1990 and was sworn to office January 1991. He served the people of Door County in that position until January 3rd, 2021. And whereas with 30 years of service, Jason holds the distinction of being the longest serving treasurer of Door County. Now therefore be it resolved that the Door County Board of Supervisors extends a sincere thank you to Jason in appreciation for his years of service and dedication to the residents of Door County, and wishes him a long and active retirement. By voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Resolution 2020-101, appointments to committees, commissions, and boards. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2020-101. I am logged in, am I not?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you make a motion?
Yes, where do I, or for this, am I not coming up?
We want to use the pads today.
Yeah, use the pads as much as we can.
Oh,
And then we're gonna see if we can.
Okay, okay. Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, so,
Okay. Let him try it.
yeah, go ahead.
Can you push your motion?
There you go.
I know.
There.
I've got it thanks to the tutorial from Beth.
Okay, so the motion, Ken, do you want to explain?
Sure, these are actually just really straightforward. We're just aligning the terms. Two of them are reappointments, and one is also new. Let's see, Don City's coming on to the Veteran Service Commission along with his bio below. But again, you see both the term when they begin and when the term ends.
Any questions? If not, by voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item 2020-102, resolution in support of increase in county child support funding.
I'll make a motion to, to be supported.
We got it.
Greg, you want to do this one?
I can try. I think Roger's going to be available too. But briefly, as explained in the resolution, over the last few years, there has been a decrease in the amount of federal and state funding available to support our child support agency. Our child support agency, similar to the Soil and Water Conservation Department, is funded largely by grants. It would be accurate to state that for every dollar the county puts in, there are $2 of federal and state money. And if the federal and state money is decreased, as it has been, it impacts negatively the ability of the child support agency to perform its functions. And we would ask if you support this resolution that asks the state and also directed the federal government to increase the funding that is available to the Door County Child Support Agency.
Any questions? Nissa?
From someone who was a single mom at one point, I mean, this is a no-brainer. I don't see why anyone would not want to put more money into child support. That's it.
Thank you. Anybody else? By voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Approval of the Door County Land and Water Resource Management Plan. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2020-102. Oh, wait a minute, not the right one. 103, approval of Door County Land and Water Resource Management Plan. That is our 10-year plan. And I see Aaron is there to explain it in more detail if anybody needs further explanation.
Can you push your button?
Oh,
Next button.
I'll get it eventually.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We discussed at committee level the possibility, or at least the suggestion was made, that a certain number of copies of this report or maybe an abridged copy, although it's all really good information, could be made available to the public so that there will be a copy at least at each of the library branches. Have we gotten anywhere on that idea?
So related to copies, we can do that after we have the plan approved. So that shouldn't be an issue at all. We certainly can do that.
Okay, I just didn't know if there was any budgetary concerns or anything. I think our Soil and Water Department did an amazing job. It's a very comprehensive report, and I think everybody in this room should read it, at least to peruse through, a lot of its maps and charts, but it talks a lot about the natural history, the geology, the way the groundwater moves, soil conditions, et cetera. There's just a lot of really good information about the natural history of this county, and it's relevant to so many of the things that we do. So thank you for a great job, and I look forward to some copies being available out there in the public. Thank you.
Thank you. So to that end, I did want to take a little bit of time to give you a brief overview of the plan, the process that we went through to update the plan and what's contained within it. So page 20 of the agenda packet has the resolution that's forwarded by the LCC, where we're looking for approval from the board for the plan. And I'm not going to go through all the details of what's contained within it, but I invite you to take a look through it. For example, the copies that Bob's suggesting, or to contact me directly. We can go to the next slide. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Awesome. I think it's important to start off with acknowledgements first, because creating a plan such as this involves a lot of people. So while I'm here today, it's really the combined efforts of the people that you see listed on the screen that resulted in the plan. I really need to give special recognition to Brian Forrest, conservationist in our department. In the resource assessment section of the plan, that's part 2. There's a lot of work that goes into compiling the data that feeds into this planning process. Other soil and water staff gave input into sections of the plan, and Beth was really key for editing and pulling the full plan together. The LCC considered drafts multiple times at meetings. Their input is reflected in the plan. And we had a citizen advisory committee. You can see the names that are listed on the right of the slide. We met once as a group in person in February, and then there was the pandemic and we had to adjust our plans after that. But really, I want to thank all of the members that were part of that group as well. And finally, members of the public. We had public input sessions, 3 sessions in February, in which we had a facilitator with UW-Madison Division of Extension run people who came to the meeting through an exercise to generate a prioritized list of their concerns that could feed into the planning process as well. Next slide, please. So transitioning from who was involved to why we go through this effort. It's established in state law. It's a requirement of each county. It's jointly managed by the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, we call it DACCAP, the Land and Water Conservation Board, that's a state board that's advisory, and the Land Conservation Committees. DACCAP establishes the guidance and oversight of the process. They review drafts and provide final plan approval. The Land and Water Conservation Board reviews plans and makes recommendations for approval or disapproval. We presented the plan to the Land and Water Conservation Board in October, and it was recommended for approval at that time. And the Land Conservation Committee, they lead the planning process to make sure the plans reflect local priorities and all of the required elements. Really, the purpose is to establish those local priorities for what you can see that's listed there: to conserve soil productivity, protect the quality of water as well as natural resources, and focus on severe issues. The outcome of having the plan, there's many benefits, from targeting work to identifying priorities, but also funding that we receive from the state, both for staffing and for cost-shared install practices. So we're on the contents. Should you want to review the plan, I've listed the sections here. The part 2, that's the one that contains the updated assessment of water quality, both groundwater, surface water quality. You can find a lot of data within there. Comprehensive listing of also the planning process for prior plans and how we identified this plan. Part 3 goes through the various programs that Soil and Water uses to implement the plan and meet those identified water quality needs and goals. Part 4 has tables that links those goals to those actions that we take and the overarching plan goals. And part 5 just runs through the adoption process. So we're at the end of the year-long process today. County board approval is the last step, at which time DACCAP will provide approval for the plan. Resource needs and goals. This is the prioritized list of resource needs that are within the plan. Each need has one or more goals that address those needs. At the top, you'll see two that you hear us talking about all the time, should be very familiar to you: protection of groundwater quality and surface water quality. Those are our top two. But also listed there are many others that we have goals established within the plan to address all of those resource needs. Most of these have been consistent over time. Door County's had a plan since 1999. Initially, the planning process was a 5-year process. We've now moved to a 10-year planning process with a review in year 5. New additions this year, though, that I do want to call your attention to are changing climate and lake levels, fertilizer and chemical use, and natural resources information sharing. Those are things that we have been working on somewhat, or also want to be focusing more of our attention on. Moving on to the implementation side of things. So each part of each program has established goals that link to the overall implementation of the plan. And agriculture is a large part of what we do. The program emphasis really has shifted over time from large, comprehensive, and very well-funded priority watershed projects. Door County was a leader for many, many years in the priority watershed program. We have shifted our focus to compliance with the agricultural performance standards and prohibitions. As the priority watershed program wound down, the state established these performance standards. Door County first adopted that ordinance in 2004, and it's been revised since, most recently in 2018 to bring in the new solarium bedrock performance standards for manure spreading in shallow soil areas. We have actively enforced that ordinance, advocated strongly for compliance over the last 15 years. We do work voluntarily whenever possible, but we do have, in those few cases where we aren't able to get voluntary compliance, we do have an enforcement process that we work through, and it's not easy, but it does achieve results. So the map on the right shows the compliance status by parcel, and it's faint, but I think the important part to note is that we do track compliance, either partial or non-compliance or full compliance by parcel, so that we are continuously monitoring the status of where we need to be working and paying our attention. It's a snapshot in time. Of course, status can change over time, and also as we have new standards. The lower left, I have a list under focus. It shows just a few areas that are a priority for us as we are going to be moving forward. Sustained compliance, again, referring to that idea that it's a snapshot in time. We need to continuously be investing our time and efforts to make sure that the gains that we've made, we maintain over time. As time passes, fewer sites become eligible for cost share, and that leads to some complications. The practices are not any less costly to install. I'm sure anyone who's involved in construction knows the practice, the cost of construction continue to climb, and cost share it's a legitimate need for many sites to come into compliance. We also talk a lot about the minimum standards. So the statewide standards that we implement through Chapter 23 are the minimum standards, and often we can identify resource needs and goals that demand additional practices beyond those minimum standards. That too can be a complicating factor when identifying what's eligible for cost share. And then nutrient management implementation. We have done a really good job in Door County. We have over 90% of the cropland acres are included in a nutrient management plan. And our emphasis is shifting over time from offering cost share to require somebody and help them have a nutrient management plan to make sure that that nutrient management plan is followed, that the producer understands their nutrient management plan and is able to actually translate the piece of paper into action on the ground. Agriculture isn't all we did, though. So I've listed some programs that we have on the left of the slide. I don't have time to go through all of them, but I do invite you, if you want to talk with me about them, I could certainly talk about them for as long as you would like. The photo on the right is a image from November of Dunes Lake. And that is an active project that we have going on right now that we are super excited about. Soil and Water has been working with partners for over a decade to study and understand the causes of eutrophication in Dunes Lake and now address it through hydraulic dredging. And so if you can see, it's a little faint, I understand, but there's in the center of the portion of the lake that's on the right-hand side, there is the hydraulic dredge there. Dredging is ongoing. There's 14 acres total that are being targeted for this year. They have 10 acres of the open water complete. It's unknown if they'll be able to finish this year. Temperature and weather are factors that play into that. If they aren't able to finish this year, the project will be extended into August of next year because of timing windows for when the work can actually be completed. But this is just one example of many programs that we have to address other concerns related to soil and water resource protection. And so that brings me to the resolution. I know this was a very brief tour through our land and water plan, but I just wanted to give you a chance to understand the planning process that we've been through. It's been a year-long effort. We started this time last year by identifying members of the Citizen Advisory Committee. And it's something that I'm really proud that we were able to work our way through the COVID pandemic and keep our timeline and results in the plan. We're looking for county board approval. That timeline was just a generic layout of where we started. We had multiple iterations back and forth with the state, with reviewing drafts, with others reviewing drafts as well. And so I'm very happy to be here asking for approval of the county board through the resolution.
Thank you, Erin. Questions? Susan.
I have two things. One, I wonder if you comment again, I think this was mentioned, but if you would comment again, you list lots and lots of projects, and I'm sure people see dollar signs attached to them. And it's my impression over the years that most, or if not all of your projects are funded by grants, but maybe you comment on that. And then the second thing is if you come back to us on another occasion and tell us about the most current water quality results that we got in 2020 with the water quality study you did.
That's a really good point. Thank you for that. Our projects are grant funded. The vast majority of what we do, whether it be for agriculture, installation of, for example, manure storage or other practices to properly contain waste. We actively seek grants from the state and other sources to cost share those practices. And so often we'll be in front of you accepting grants to that end. Likewise, the Dunes Lake project is another great example of a partnership in which Ducks Unlimited received, I believe, $700,000 and some dollars of the grant to fund that project. Soil and Water, we have $100,000 from the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program to put into that project as well. But thank you for highlighting that, Susie, is that all of our efforts really revolve around identifying what are the best ways to meet those resource needs and then find the grant funding to support those projects.
Sandra?
Yeah, I guess I have a couple questions. How has the plan changed to meet the change in agriculture today? I mean, this weekend looking at a Farm Bureau income chart showing that basically farm income hasn't changed in 20 years. There's been highs and lows, but it's pretty much been a level, And I hear farmers say, well, the nutrient management plan, it's great. I no longer have cattle. I'm not getting manure from anywhere. And yet I have to keep doing this expensive program. Is there you ever consider some sort of shortcut saying this is this and that and not have to go through all of those steps? I mean, that's just one example. Another is the conservation reserve program that I think is only, if I'm thinking of the right PrEP program, is that the acronym for that's eligible? Farmers in Claybanks are eligible, but it's not eligible for the county.
That would be the farmland preservation program.
Well,
with the tax credit that you're.
There's
also the conservation reserve program that FSA runs, and we have a buffer program that's an enhancement. So that's the conservation reserve enhancement program. Because of so many acres going out of production, maybe farmers have those options a little broader through the county. It could be helpful. So I have a few thoughts related to that. We're always looking to meet both the landowner's needs as well as the resource needs, the water quality needs at any particular site. And when we work with a producer, we often have to have cost share to offer to them in order to require compliance. And that's at an established rate of either 70% or up to 90% in cases of economic hardship. And so we are always considering what's the most cost-effective way to meet those water quality needs, but also make something that's manageable for the producer as well. Related to nutrient management, it's important not only for those who apply manure, but also for anyone who uses fertilizer or employs tillage on a field, because it helps us meet our soil erosion goals, as well as there are some places where we have concerns about nitrates as well. And so it's not only for manure applications. I truly believe that we need to maintain our emphasis on nutrient management, because that's where we're going to be able to make progress towards meeting our water quality goals.
Laura?
Thanks. I did call you a couple of months ago. Sorry I never got back to you. So now's a good time to have this discussion with the plan that came forward. So what is your plan, or perhaps this could be a committee referral for a topic on the zone of contributions for the wells, like the city wells. So we had briefly mentioned that, and then also just a comment on looking at a short program or short form for nutrient management. I think that would be great for the committee to look at that and have those further discussions with you, because you know it's so in depth and there is such an importance to it. But I do hear the need in the agriculture industry and how they are different, that it could maybe get separated out or fine-tuned to not be so extensive to some that are not doing such aggressive type of agriculture. So just food for thought on that going forward. But yeah, if you have anything to add on how or what we could do for zone of contributions to the city wells, that would be appreciative.
Sure. And so the zone of contribution to the city wells is an area that's been delineated that is the source water area where water from those areas feeds into the wells, either in the city of Sturgeon Bay or other municipal wells. Soil and Water participated in working with the Sturgeon Bay. I want to say it's been some time since that plan was developed. And so we have had conversations over the last year or so about how we might revisit that plan. I would say that we actively do use that delineated zone of contribution when reviewing practices, when reviewing what the resource needs are. It's a layer that you can turn on the web map. And so I don't want you to leave thinking that we have just ignored the zone of contribution. That couldn't be further from the truth. But any actions to protect groundwater, whether it be in the zone of contribution or elsewhere, those certainly are priorities for us. And so I'm certainly, I know we have been trying to connect and haven't managed to, So let's continue that conversation.
Yeah, let's continue to do that on what we can do to enforce that or for the best of those city wells in the water. I think that there's a lot of, let's say that I was surprised to know that there was not as much protection as we should or could have as we would consider others, especially for our city water. So, and not to say we're not paying attention to it or not to say that, not to mislead, but as we've had this conversation and the conversations go forward, we could do more, and I think we should.
Right. So I don't want anyone to leave this
thinking
that we are not adequately protecting the zone of contribution for the city wells, but we're always looking for ways that we can improve, as you say, Laura. Yeah. So that's a conversation to keep going.
Great. Thank you.
Sandra.
Yes, I guess just to expand on what Aaron said, if I recall correctly, going back to, I think 1992, when I first came on the board, I was on the Land Conservation Committee for 10 years. And that was at the point when we had the Northern Door watershed, and we were just seeking approval for the Red River Sturgeon Bay watershed, which was implemented maybe 3 or 4 years later in the 90s. And the zone of contribution for the city was well studied at that time and delineated with, working with the federal agency, the state, whoever was involved with the determination of those zones. So there's been an ongoing effort in that department to address that.
Indeed.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much, Aaron.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Resolution 2020-104, 2021 Land Use Services Department private on-site wastewater treatment system fees. Dave, medical.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2020-04. As you know, from time to time, fees have to come before the board for review. This is an example of just a subset of fees. One of the things that occurred, we look at the page 24, some of the fees got condensed, removed, some of them went up, some of them went down. Part of this was driven by the new software that we're using in consolidating efforts to make it easier for you.
Questions? Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious if anybody knows what's the upper threshold for what a private wastewater system would utilize? We're looking at systems with less than 3,000 gallons of water per day and systems with more than 3,000 gallons per day. Is there anybody that uses, say, more than 6,000 gallons per day? I'm just curious if there's an upper, I guess, for what is the upper threshold, and do we know numbers in the county for how many systems do fall under that 3,000 gallons per day or less, and how many systems fall in that 3,000 gallons or more per day category? Do we know those numbers? It's okay if not. I understand that nobody in the room can address it, but I was just curious.
I guess the best I can do it, Mariah asked me if she needed to be down here. I didn't think she needed to be. Keep in mind that private water systems are throughout the county. Anything that's not on a sanitary sewer system, right? So we're talking the landmark, those kinds of structures. So all of that is tracked. Every entity is maintained and documented as to the amount and the bigger you are. If I remember correctly, we have additional testing requirements.
Thanks. I could follow up with Mariah myself. It's a question that just popped in my head rather than saying that. So thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we're going to go to the water board on this one. That has passed on the vote of 19 yes, 2 absent. Thank you. We are going to alter our agenda at this time. We're going to move down to resolution 2020-111, the Canaan Island Project authorization to proceed with phase 4. Mr. Ospek.
Also move to
Do that.
Seconded.
You want me to, or you want to explain it, Ken, or should I?
Sure, I can do it. So what we've done is for Ken Island, we've broken these down into phases. So phase 3 of the project was obviously the interpretive center, but also part of phase 3 was to do the, final project again for, heading into phase 4, which is the restoration of the lighthouse itself. We had that done. Wayne worked with the architects in putting together a final bid or a final scope of work. Then we had that number put together and looked at in terms of the total cost that would come in, which is provided in the packet. So what we're looking at doing is when we're discussing with Maritime Museum, they're hoping to go out for fundraising now for the project. So in essence, what we're doing is we're looking for authorization today to actually begin that process. And should they be able to raise those funds, then we would again bring that back and then proceed forward with the project. But in essence, we've got a checkpoint all the way through for this project as we proceed. And again, we're calling this the phase 4, which right now would be taking this out and trying to get the funds related to the project. Again, we're not looking at using any tax levy dollars for this project. And then again, once we raise those funds, then we can actually go forward with the work.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, in reviewing the documents provided here, I don't see any specific reference. I'm just wondering, as we move forward as a county, especially in light of working on green tier status and sustainability, I just wonder if sustainability practices are being taken into account here when we're going out for bid and looking for companies. Are they following green technologies and sustainability practices when we do this work?
It's items that we can look at, but I also know it's a historic restoration project, so we have to follow all the historic guidelines for the restoration of the project. And it also has to meet all of the requirements through the Bureau of Land Management in terms of the restoration and maintenance of the building itself.
But I mean, we can still do, when we can do the things in a sustainable way, we are promoting that and requiring that of the contractors.
Yes.
Anybody else? Chad Egbert?
Yes, this topic came up at least in discussion at the finance committee, and we'd be looking for more info at this next meeting. Not specifically this phase 4, but the earlier phases, the Maritime Museum, I believe, didn't have the funds to do the work, and the county worked with them to advance some of that. We were asking where they are in that payment status and where it's at. If Ken could elaborate on that.
Sure. So for phase 3 for that project, we actually advanced the Maritime Museum with the funds to complete that project. And when we did a fiscal model, where we probably had the funds returned back to us within a 3-year window. Obviously, with the pandemic and also the high water levels, that has, impacted. I know they gave a report at Facilities and Parks. I think the attendance was down only 25% compared to other sites that were down closer to 50%. So obviously, it's still a very popular site. Again, based off that projection, though, we're probably looking at a 4-year payback instead of a 3-year payback. I know they're going through their closeout numbers, and I don't know if we'll have the full report on finance next week or not. I can check with Steve to see if that's going to be available. If not, it'll be in January for sure.
I guess then to follow up, will the Maritime Museum have the funds to do this phase 4 at this time? Or are they trying to raise money from other sources? How is it going to be?
Sure. So the intent of the project is, and that's why we put together the scope, is they feel pretty positively that they can acquire grants for funding the project, and that's their intent, is to go out and apply for those grants and hopefully get funding for the project itself. So again, the initial discussions with the Maritime Museum right now is they're not asking for the county to do any advanced funding on this phase at this time. They're going out to get the funding for the project itself.
Thank you. Anybody else? There is no fiscal impact at the moment, so we're going to go by voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right, we'll move back up to resolution 2020-105. There's actually 3 resolutions that are pretty much tied together, which I will let Kenny explain. We'll start with the 2020-105 amend resolution 2020-84, the COVID-19 paid leave for responder public safety positions to extend to the effective date. I have a motion. Thank you.
So just briefly on these, and we can go through if you have questions, but let me just give a general overview. So this is part of the year-end closeout. Obviously, when we reacted to the initial pandemic, we put together a series of policies that obviously impacted our certain things that we did, whether it's for public safety or the alternative work. Well, the alternative work schedule was a little different, but also the supplementary paid leave. And again, since we're end of the year, those are all set to expire in some form or fashion at the end of the year. And obviously, we're still operating within the emergency orders and also the pandemic. So we're looking at extending these or extending their effective date. So 105 is for public safety and positions, and the dates that refer to that. 106 is our alternative work schedules. Again, what we did last year is we actually passed an alternative work schedule. And we made it temporary for 1 year, then we had the pandemic. So what we're going to do is analyze that, and then we're going to bring it back as a form of policy. What we're asking for is just extending that for an additional year, simply because we've been operating in multiple fashions just because of the pandemic. So we're asking to extend that. And then likewise, with the supplemental paid leave, that isn't so much an extension, but just a clarification on how we're working with the supplementary paid leave. In that case, this is a clarification in terms of we have a separation of employment, that we're establishing a 90-day look-back window for those situations where we could actually make them apply their PTO as part of the separation with the county. So it's just a quick summary, not trying to rush through them so we can take them one at a time. If you have questions, but I just want to give you context of why we looked at that and why we're just trying to clean this up at the end of the year. I don't know, Grant, if you wanted to add anything or...
No, if anybody has questions, I can try to answer them, but I think it's getting some.
There are no questions on 105. We'll go to the board. Let us pass on a vote of 19 yes. 2 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2020-106, amend resolution number 2019-71, alternative work schedules to extend the sunset date. Motion is second. Elizabeth, did you have a question?
No. Did I have it pressed?
Anybody have any questions on this one? Now we'll go to the voter board. That's passed on a vote of 19 yes, 2 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2020-107, amend the March 16, 2020 York County COVID-19 Public Health Emergency Supplemental Paid Leave Administrative Order. Second. Alexis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just was like, what I read did not, how I understood what I read did not jive with how it was explained. So can you help me understand it? Is it a rewording of what was intended, what was there originally, or is this a change in what was intended? Because we're extending the time that we thought we'd be in the pandemic.
Sure, let me just get to the right page so I can actually show you, give it to you properly.
I'm on page 34 of the packet. I think that's where we're at.
So if you go to, yes, page 34, you'll see the item, I guess in my page it turned out as blue. I'm not on the tablets, but you'll see that, I guess what we consider the new wording that's been added back, or what not added back, but we clarified the wording and how it's being implemented. So again, what we're trying to do is if an individual uses their SPL, and then within that 90-day window, let's use myself, I use SPL this week, and then next week I give notice. You're within a 90-day window. Instead of giving you the SPL hours, we're going to use your PTO hours against that. Instead of having you both use your SPL and then get paid out your PTO. So again, what we're trying to do is this was a benefit to keep employees in their banks and their vacation time protected. But likewise, if they're leaving employment, it was not meant to supplement their income by having to get paid out additional PTO time. So that's what we're trying to do. And we thought it's a fair look back period of 90 days to apply to the employees since we're providing this as an extra benefit to the employee.
So you're looking back 90 days from when they put in their notice?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess my only comment, I understand from an employer standpoint what you're trying to do and what it is, but as an employee standpoint, I know a lot of folks have had to leave employment, especially working moms at this time who have probably used this bank and also their leave banks as well. So what I read was that even if you use all of your leave, now you're going to owe the county the SPL money that you spent. Is that correct? So you would have to pay us and pay the county in wages for leave banks that you had to use.
Sure. Can I go to just clarify on how we're using that?
Originally, it was a 1 day to 1 day ratio. So if they were using the SPL and then they left, they would be required to pay that back as a number one, or the hourly rate that they used to supplement. So they would be required to return it if now we just put the 90-day look back in instead, because we didn't know how long it was going to be. Right. So now we just put a 90-day window in instead of looking back to when it started.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So a lot of people have different banks of time. The PTO approves on a regular basis. So
you would be so you're supplementing what banks you were not using for using the SPL bank.
Only if you. It's in addition to what we already provide as the supplemental was.
But it was provided necessarily, in my opinion, because working parents didn't have childcare, we had to care for other people. It wasn't just like to me, it was a necessary additional leave in order to keep people afloat during the pandemic, I guess. So I totally understand from an employer standpoint what we're trying to do, but from a pandemic and an economic impact to the employer or employee, I'm sorry. I don't feel good about it. I guess and how I'm understanding it and how it would impact me as an employee. So that's my comment. Thank you.
This supplemental leave was also approved and put out before the federal government provided 12 weeks of leave. So the government had actually realized that there was a need for people that need childcare and provided an extension to the family medical leave. So they were able to take 12 weeks in addition to this.
Bob? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering, and I guess I'm kind of addressing Alexis, is the 90-day, is that, it sounds to me like the 90-day period is sort of arbitrary. And would it make a difference if it was 30 days or 60 days versus 90? These are just open questions. Thank you.
We picked 90 days. We thought that was a reasonable look back period.
Susan?
So I just want to clarify the issue that Alexis raised. I understood this differently, I think, at admin when we talked about it. And I think what I thought was there are the banks that people accrue time, and within the 90-day period, if you use the SPL and then you terminate, you would have to, do the 1-to-1. What I didn't pick up on is, and I'm not still sure this is right, if for some reason they have used all of their bank and they have nothing else banked, and then they use some SPL and leave. That piece about then they're going to pay for it out of a salary or whatever, is that right? Or if, because they have nothing left in their other banks, it's a wash? Can you clarify that? Did I make sense in what I asked?
You did. And if they had used all of their time, then it would turn into an hourly rate based on.
So they would still have to repay it.
Right, correct.
That makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those things where we're not trying to, again, we're dealing with the pandemic, but we're also dealing with, I guess, cash, and we're dealing with and again, not that we're not being careful or non-caring, but when this first came out, there was nothing from the federal government initially that was established. I think we were one of three counties that actually established a bonus bank of time. All the other counties that have not done anything, from our understanding. So again, from us, is a very generous, but also we thought right thing to do is provide our employees the opportunity to have additional time and not also have to burn up all their PTO. After that, then you also had the federal leave that did come out, and that was, depending on how they applied it, was up to 12 weeks in terms of the situation that applies, that was under the federal leave. So between that 12 weeks plus our additional 3 weeks, that's 15 weeks of time that are potentially available. And I understand it's a pandemic and everyone has to go through that. But again, I guess all we're trying to do is find out the balance of that. If someone's knowingly going to retire and use that, but they have their time in their banks, you know, that's, but then when they separate employment, they want to get paid out in addition to that. That also, I guess, that doesn't settle right on my end in terms of that opportunity for those individuals. So I understand the one case that you're bringing up, but I guess you're also trying to use the other end of more of the cases that we've experienced where we have separation of employment and they have 400 hours of PTO that they're going to get paid out on, or whatever the maximum limit is on that. So I guess we're just trying to find that balance. It was a benefit that we provided, and I'm proud that we did that. But I guess I'm just trying to find that balance in terms of how much, and again, it's one of those things for 95% of the employees, it's not going to have any impact at all. But again, it's just a few that we have in terms of their separation, that they should look at that in terms of their decision of when they separate from us. That's all we're asking.
Laura?
Yeah. So I too understand that the employer and employee versus standpoint, but I do see that you're trying to prevent a scenario where somebody's capitalizing on something that they may not need, and they're taking advantage of a system just because of the way it's been rolled out. So with that being said, are we making certain with the way we have it worded that we're not actually causing some trouble to somebody that really did need it or could really truly benefit from that extra couple hours? And so that's the question. But also, this is the push to get our state and federal government to getting out money for those in need. And if we need to be doing something on this local county, local government level for that to happen, that should be happening. And we should be doing, our body as a body, we should be doing that forward. So I get the cap on it. I get that you have to say, instead of looking 12 months back, you want to put some days on it. But how we define the separation, maybe, or how we separate the ones trying to take advantage of a system or the number game than those that are not. So if you feel like that is settled between Grant, you, and other part of admin, I would like to hear that or add that to this. Thank you.
I guess, again, I'm just going to talk a lot of looking at Grant and with Kelly. I mean, we could add a provision that we'll only look back and remove their time that are on the banks. Again, we're limiting it. Again, if I do the scope, generally on scope, so many employees, 95% are never going to do it, but now we have 5% that are looking at potentially retiring or doing that. I guess we could minimize the impact for those that used up all their time. The only caveat I would say is that there are some that are, I guess, what we call frequent flyers in terms of exhausting both their PTO or sick time and stuff like that, simply because it's there, they use it. So in those cases, even though they might separate, you'd be rewarding them for having that mentality. So again, we're talking about such a small portion of the employment. I guess I'm open to either option, but I guess, again, there could be one case where, yes, they tried to be a good employee, they used up their sick time or they used up their PTO, they used the federal leave and they still had to go through all this stuff, and yes, they separate employment and it puts them in a spot. I don't know how many of those cases we have, but again, I'm just trying to, again, have that discussion, have that balance, so. I don't know, Grant or Kelly, do you guys have any comment on that? Or?
I mean, the sticking point seems to be making an employee who was out of accrued paid leave pay cash back to the county for their SPL bank. And if there's a discomfort with that, you just eliminate the last sentence of the blue language. You have to remember too, this has prospective application only. We cannot apply this retroactively, so it's only going to apply to people who make use of the SPL bank if this resolution is adopted from this point forward. So they're on notice what the rules of the game are. But if you think that it's too harsh a penalty for somebody to have to pay back the cash equivalent of SPL hours used within a 90-day look-back period, if they don't have any other paid leave accrued to apply, then if you do away with the last sentence, that eliminates that. And by the last sentence, I mean the last sentence of the blue language that starts out should know. If you don't think that it's too harsh a penalty, you'll leave it.
Alexis?
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion and clarification. And for me, I think it would help, like Grant just suggested, for that last line. I think that using SPL and FMLA and all of those things, in my experience, there is a burden on the employer or employee, to use those, where you have to prove that it's COVID-19 related. You have to be caring for a child because there's no childcare or school. There's all these things that you have to meet, in my experience, that gives you access to those extra 15 weeks, as the administrator pointed out. So to me, these are not leave banks that the frequent flyers can access. And if that is the case, then that's the policy change that should be in place, in my opinion. And secondly, that Grant suggestion. And then finally, if there is a handful of cases where working parents are separating from county employment and have exhausted all their leave banks, I think that's where I'm sensitive to, and the part that I would like to see somehow pulled out, where they're not using these banks as frequent flyers, they're not just taking time off to take time off and that kind of thing. So that's more so my comment, in the balance, pull the balance that way that I would like to see. Thank you.
Susan?
Just to clarify, I don't have any problem with the days off coming back out of their other banks. I don't have any problem with that at all. I do have a problem with the cash. And so personally, I would appreciate that last sentence being out of there.
You got a motion to amend?
Okay, I make a motion to amend to remove that sentence.
Second.
Sorry. So you're starting with the word should. I just want to clarify.
Yes.
Okay.
So Grant, we need to do the amendment first before we continue the discussion on the original, correct?
Correct. We would vote on the amendment, and then it would go back to either the original motion if the motion failed, or the amended motion, or the amended resolution if the motion passes.
Can we have discussion on the amendment?
Yes.
Yes. Does anybody want to speak to the amendment? David, then I go.
Okay, so we're speaking about all these different dollar values. We are speaking specifically of the county's SPL dollar values, right?
Correct.
And that length of time is what?
120 hours.
112.
112
And then
hours.
prorated for part-time.
And then prorated was part-time.
112 hours total. Out of how many of these COVID hours that we seem to really be speaking about in 15 weeks? Right?
Well, and if it's for child, sorry.
So we're talking a small portion of the total hours we're talking about that are somehow tied together in this document. Right?
Again, I'm not sure what your question is, but with the federal leave, there's certain items where if they qualify for that leave, they've used the federal leave banks first.
Right.
Because they exhausted all their federal leave banks, then they could use SPL.
Which is county-based money.
Which is the county-based. And then after that, if they didn't do that, then they started to go into their own personal banks, whether it was PTO or that. That's what we had put together in the policy. Correct.
So we're talking a small portion of all the monies that are available underneath these current scenarios, 20% or so. I view the striking of the original verbiage as not realizing that this might be an issue. I'm going to presume that this has come up, and that's the reason we're looking at this change.
Yes.
Okay. I don't have an issue with having that last sentence in place. It is an extra that we as a county have decided to put the bill for. And there are people out there, unfortunately, that are more than willing to game the values as using those words to take advantage of that. Now, maybe if there's a more palatable way to change it to say 30 days back for that part of it. But I don't have a problem keeping it in place. To me, that should have been there in the original verbiage to make it clear that you can't, that the people that if you choose to do this intentionally, it will be noticed. Thank you.
Samantha Engelbert.
Okay, I guess this last discussion kind of answers my question, but what I would have asked was if we remove this line, are we reducing or eliminating the effectiveness of what he's saying we need to do to protect ourselves as an employer?
By striking that, obviously there's going to be some employees that don't have the full amount of time. Again, this is pretty minimal overall employment for the size of our organization. But again, even if they have, at least if we have the ability to look at and use their banks that are left, that at least eliminates some of the liability of paying out the PTO in addition to them applying to the SPL. So that helps us. Again, if they don't have that, then again, we lose that portion of it. But again, that's a decision for this body to make.
Laura?
Yeah, the last question was one of my questions, and I do agree. I feel like that we take away the weight of this if we remove that last line. And coming from somebody that didn't have PTO, I couldn't take that with me when I quit a job. I think our company has gone above and beyond already those 3 weeks, and I see that this is protecting the county. It's unfortunate, but yeah, we do need to somewhat protect our assets. And if the administration team has found it suit to make this amendment, I'm trusting what they're seeing and hearing behind closed doors that we should go along with it at this time.
Joel?
So I guess as a final point of clarification, as an example, an employee has 400 hours of time banked up in, PTO pay. That's sitting in their bank to use in the calendar year. They are entitled to 12 weeks of federal pay. They are entitled to now our time, the SPL money here for
112 hours.
Okay, that. So somebody gets sick, has to be off work. They're going to utilize all their federal time off for pay. They're going to now exhaust that. They're going to drop in their SPL pay and use that, getting money the whole time. Now, for whatever reason, when those two banks are used up, they're still sitting on their 400 plus hours of PTO time. They decide to quit their account. You're saying the cover now is going to go back, and rather than paying them out for the PTO time that they have accrued, you're going to take that SPL money out of there and say, we're not going to give you that. We're going to make you use your PTO time to charge back against that SPL. Right. If they had no 400 hours, they would just walk away. So you're saying now with this, they're going to pay back that time, cash money payback, right? Because they had no PTO time.
Correct.
You could have. I have a problem. I agree with Alexa to a point at admin. I guess I didn't fully understand this. If they have to actually pay back cash money, I would draw a line and say that that's unacceptable. They probably don't want to quit. Some other issues are going on that they don't want to do. They'd probably rather be working. To make them refund the county back the time after they've exhausted every single thing they had to use, federal, PTO, SPO, everything. I think we're pushing hard on that myself. I'd say let them walk away. They got bigger problems at that point in time. They have them pay back $40 or whatever it might be. I guess it's a stretch, in my opinion. As a look at it from an employee perspective, I see that. But I certainly understand the whole employer side as well.
And
I guess I'd like to ask the staff what their opinion is of this amendment. Or Kelly and Kent.
Again, I think the benefit that we provided is very generous. We could have it expire at the end of the year, to be honest, and we would not have the SPL. I mean, that'd be the other option to say, okay, we're taking away the SPL because the federal leave is there. But I think as an employer, we're trying to make a statement that we're trying to stand behind our employees. I guess all we're trying to do is just add a little bit of logic back into it, saying that if you use up your SPL, now you retire. I mean, next week, I don't think it's fair either that you get paid out your full PTO allotment under that situation. So I guess I'm just trying to find that balance fiscally for us to say that we're a good employer and we want you to stay employed with us. But again, if you know you're going to retire and you're doing that and you're just going to supplement and try to get more paid out for your PTO or extend that, I guess I have an issue with that too, to find that balance. And again, I know there's maybe a circumstance where it's not. And again, I think we're talking of some pretty minimal numbers, but again, it's just one of those things we're just trying to clarify what we got with the book. So.
I would agree with Ken. Trying to find the balance is difficult. No one expected that the system last as long as it did. And I think when it originally was drafted, that it was open-ended to say when COVID ends, that we would just do that whole look back through that whole time. So coming up with the 90 days was a way to kind of say we're not looking at everything, we're just going to look back 90 days and we're hoping that you stay employed, kind of a return for what we're providing as a benefit, that we have you stay employed and get some work done.
I guess in my mind, this one example, so for example, if we did, and we don't do it much, but in the past, because we haven't done it, but if you did a tuition, investment in an employee, to me, if we would send someone to school and you would pay their tuition for $1,200, a lot of those stipulations have the fact in it is that you say if you leave after you graduate or get your certificate and you leave within 3 months, we're going to ask you to pay that back. And that's just a common stipulation. I see this as no different. It's an investment. We're providing an investment to the employees. I know it's the pandemic thing, but that's all we're saying is that if you're going to use that benefit, we're just saying within the 90 days, we hope that you're still employed with us. If not, we're going to try to apply for your PTO or try to get that back. So I know it's different with the application of the pandemic, but to me, I'm associating it similar to if you did a tuition reimbursement, you're going to have that same type of stipulation on it. So,
Dave, had to go.
The other side of that employee coin is the employee that's a long-term employee or any length of employee with 30 hours, 40 hours bank accrued, 400 bank accrued hours. And that employee decides to retire or is retiring. It's already been planned to retire in 2020 as an example. Come his retirement date, he's got those hours banked up, and his mind is, many employees look at those kind of hours as being my retirement fund, my first trip out somewhere fund. And remember, those same employees that have been diligent, strong, good employees, and I'm not saying anybody retiring any other way is not a diligent, good, strong employee, are going to say, why are you taking money out of my reserved money, but then not taking out of the other individuals that have no reserved monies to take out? That's the other side of that coin. You have the other employees that have been long, diligent, long employees, and now you're going to penalize them for leaving within a window of time that everybody knew they were leaving in 2021. And this happens to be going on at the same time.
Alexis?
Thank you. This will be the last I think I have to say on it, because I feel like the equitable issue here is that the access to these banks is for employees who are sick with COVID specifically or in quarantine, caring for somebody that's in quarantine, had childcare issues, that sort of thing. This is not a leave bank to be used to go on a vacation in the pandemic, first of all. Second of all, to the administrator's example of tuition, I understand that that's similar, but that is an optional career advancement sort of agreement. And I completely agree with that application of this sort of stipulation. But what we're talking about is leave bank for folks that did not choose to get sick, did not choose to have childcare taken away, did not choose to do that sort of thing. So to me, similar, but very different. And again, I just want to go back to, I think what we're talking about is two types of employees. One that is a choice to retire and then using this sort of bank, and the other that I'm trying to point out is that we're also mixing in the working parents who are stuck in a horrible situation. And I just am looking for some sort of balance back that way, or some sort of language in this amendment that would, apply specifically to retirements or planned leaves, or I don't know what that language is, but that's just what I'm asking and advocating for. So thank you.
Laura?
Last time to talk to you. Thank you. This is my third time speaking on this, and I usually only give it twice. By this amendment, I'm concerned that people would see this policy and read it and think, well, there is no action being taken against me, or likely will not be, because that is what it said in the policy, so therefore they'll do it. That's a possibility, right? Second is putting it in, keeping it in. It still is the county's choice to go after those case-by-case situations. I do believe the people that are implementing these policies know when to do that and when not to do that. If there's people taking advantage of it, or I hate to use that phrase, taking advantage, but that's I think the best way to wrap this up. And this SBL was not available before COVID. So, and how we look at that and how we shift ours around. But truly, if you take out this action by allowing this amendment go forward, then somebody would maybe gravitate towards doing it. If I'm wrong, please correct me. But by leaving it in, the county still has a choice then to do that or not. Thank you.
Actually, that's one legal thing. We absolutely do not. We would not discriminate. If we have to go after one person, we have to go after all. We're not going to get involved in pleading people's reasons for taking the SBL. So I don't want to give anybody with the impression that nor could you put language in here that would be legally defensible, making that distinction. You're saying, and I'll create some ridiculous examples. Somebody under 40 who uses it, and somebody who's over 65 decides retirement. We're going to go after the person at 65 and decides retirement, and not go after the person under 40. You have an age discrimination claim. So we have to be blind to the people that use this. If we have it, it's got to be an across-the-board policy that applies to everybody. So,
Susan?
Just to clarify, if you vote for the amendment, what you're saying, I think, is I don't mind you going back into the paid time off and taking the equivalent out. That would still go on. What wouldn't happen is the person who had run out of those having to pay a cash payment back to the county. That's my understanding of taking that sentence out. Okay.
Cara?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to be really quick and throw my support behind the supervisor at District 13. I'm really grateful that Alexis brought this up, and I think the discussion has been really great. And I wanted to strongly support the amendment to strike that line about having to pay cash as an employee. Thank you so much.
Okay, nobody else at the moment. We will go to the voter board. This is for the amendment to remove the last sentence of the highlighted blue. Okay, so the amendment has passed to remove the last sentence by a vote of 11 to 8, 2 absent. Okay, so now we would go back to the original motion as amended. So now we're back to discussion on the amended motion. Dave Edigal?
So as amended, what has really changed from the verbiage being stricken and the verbiage being replacing that?
A 90-day look back instead of just open-ended.
It says 90 days in the first one.
After COVID ends, but COVID hasn't ended yet. This would just be a 90-day look back from the time we give them.
Okay. So basically identical except adding an additional look back window.
Correct.
Anybody else? We'll do a roll call. Okay, so now we're going to the vote.
I'm thinking.
Sorry. Sorry. Make sure you weren't sleeping.
No.
That's passed with a vote of 16 yes, 3 nay, and 2 absent. Thank you. Okay. Resolution 2020-108, transfer of non-budgeted funds under 65.90 Wisconsin statutes, A&E services, development of residential options for sexually violent persons on supervised release per statute 1980.08 Wisconsin statutes. Santa Engelbert.
Okay, this is requesting to the Finance Committee who worked at the property, the Facilities and Parks Committee has been looking at, and they need money to do the first investigative work out at the Justice Center property.
Do you want to make that motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve. Resolutions that you're jumping around here, confusing me sometimes.
Well, Seth, I don't got a lot on your mind. Probably got a lot to do better. Okay, I have a motion in a second. Any discussion? All right, we'll go to the board. 2/3 vote.
Yes, 2/3 vote, and if I can add something for context, there was a hearing on Monday on a petition for discharge on a 980 York County resident. The outcome of that hearing was that the person was ordered to supervise release, and the 120-day clock started ticking. So by April 13th, 2021, we need to have a residential placement in York County for this person. I'm not saying it's going to be the one we're developing, but saying that the Chapter 980 was a theory, then it was enacted as a law, and now we're starting to see the consequences of it. And we are having individuals that are petitioning for discharge, petitioning for supervised release, and we expect to have approximately half dozen of them over the next however many number of years. That we will be responsible for finding residential placements. If there is a silver cloud to the line or silver lining to the cloud, it's that the state pays for it. We have to locate it, but the state ultimately pays for it.
Dave,
the question I keep forgetting to ask when this comes through, and I finally remember now, is quite often the state mandates minimum requirements for what the living space might be. Are we gonna be okay, because I think we're talking originally 2 buildings. Are we gonna be okay with, these structures we're talking about putting 6 people in them? Are we gonna meet the state requirements? That effectively would be, if it's 6, that would be effectively at any given time, 3 in each building.
They wouldn't all be released, I guess, all at once. Again, maybe, I guess, in our mind, they're staggered in terms of their placement. And again, what we're doing is whatever structures we do have, I know Grant's already put out an email to the state in terms of what are the, I guess, building requirements from a code standpoint, and we're working on that in that aspect. So that when we get that, we will take that into account when we're looking at whether we look at a modular or stick construction or whatever we have to do, we'll be looking at that.
Because even with that, they may be staggered, but many of these are 10, 15-year placements even. So they may be staggered as far as coming out. They could be all 6 of them at the same time anyways at staggered windows of time. And that's what I was getting at was, are they allowed to share bedrooms, that kind of.
Unfortunately, that's not something we can, each individual Chapter 980 person is going to undergo what's called, I'll screw the word, a functional assessment as to the wraparound services they need. And there will be individuals who can't be living in a residential placement with anybody else. There will be individuals that will be able to. So it's going to vary from person to person, and we will, to the degree we're able to, we'll meet sort of the bricks and mortar requirements, but we can't really predict what the individuals coming out are going to require, so we can't predict how many persons will be able to put into a particular residential placement, whether it's the one we're developing or one we find in the community to lease.
So that this email you sent out inquiring about minimum requirements is going to end up being our best guess at starting in this venture of providing spaces within our own facilities.
And my inquiry really was as to the building code, not to what these individuals require, in terms of that sort of a thing. So, yeah, it's our best guess.
Thank you.
Alexis?
Thank you. I was just asking for council to restate the date that we need housing by. I just missed it.
For this particular individual, the clock started running on Monday, yesterday, and we have 120 days to file a report with the State Department of Health Services, indicating that we've identified a suitable residential option for this person, and that goes to April 13th, 2021. The day after my birthday, in case anybody wants.
Thank you.
And Dan Osted's birthday too.
I'll cheer.
That's more important.
Yeah, so how do you feel waking up in those rooms now?
More of a curiosity than anything else. How long is the supervision for this individual?
At least a year. When they're ordered on supervised release, they will be in the facility, in the residential placement for at least 12 months.
All right, we'll go to the board of order.
After this, could we take a break?
As soon as we finish this vote.
All right, here we go.
That is passed on a vote of 18 yes, 2 absent. Okay.
Okay, for the supervisors, obviously take a break, but then we also have lunch, set up bag lunches, so they're all safe, so you can grab your lunch if you're like sit up, whatever you want to do as a recess, working lunch or whatever.
Well, what I'd like to do is we'll do a 30-minute recess.
Very good.
Yeah, we'll include the lunch.
Very good. So 12:15.